Hey friends, welcome to the Kids Ministry Circle podcast. Kids Ministry Circle is a community for kids ministry leaders to be encouraged and equipped to love and serve the local church. I'm your host, Lauren Jackson, and today's episode is kind of unique. It's the first day of 2025. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, January 1st, it's the start of a new year. You may be back into work or you may still be at home in your athleisure wear. Whatever it is, it's such a great time to just reflect and to sit and to listen and to share stories and to talk about the lessons you learned. And of course, if you're a numbers person, you collect all the data from the previous year and you analyze it until you can analyze it no more. This episode will be a little bit unique, just like today is a little bit of a special day. It's just going to be me. And I'm going to talk about one of the things that I get to do here in the Kids Ministry Circle community. And I'm going to share some things that I have learned this year and what I have said over and over and over again. And hopefully, and maybe these things you need to hear also as we kick off a new year together. So let's jump in. Like I mentioned before, one of the many jobs that I get to have inside the world of Kids Ministry Circle is I get to be a coach. I get to coach kids ministry leaders from all over in one-on-one settings. And together we set goals, we work on projects, and we build strategies. It's one of my favorite things. I've coached a handful of leaders this year, and I often find myself saying the same thing over and over and over again. Not in the mom nagging kind of way, but in a way where it serves as a reminder to me and to the leaders that I get to coach that we are all facing similar frustrations, or we're all navigating the same tensions. Sometimes we feel like our church is the only church. And when I repeat things that make an impact, I am reminded that God is at work in the greater church and that we're not alone in our frustrations and that we can be a part of a greater kids ministry community and encourage one another and share resources and spur each other on as we are on this big race. Many of us can say, I've been there, or I feel that same way. And there's so much joy to be found when we do ministry together. So, in the spirit of togetherness, I'm going to share these 5 things that I've said the most this year. So, I hope you're ready. Let's dive in. All right, the first thing is don't say no for them. Many of my conversations revolve around recruiting, onboarding, and training volunteers. I often encourage leaders to write out a list of 10 to 15 people who are not currently serving, but would make great volunteers. Then it's the hard part, making the ask. It's so easy to make excuses for other people. We believe things like they have too much going on, or it must not be their season, or I don't think they would show up that early to serve. The reality is that when we say no for people in our church, we are not giving them an opportunity to say yes. And we're not giving them an opportunity to be changed by participating in the work of the local church ministry. When we say no for them, we are assuming that they would rather do and be anywhere else than invest in the next generation. And that just cannot be true. They may say no, and you can think to yourself, I told you so. But what if they said yes? What if through your step of obedience, your team grows? The risk is worth the reward, in my opinion. Now, one more thing. Even if that person says no, ask them to pray that God would bring the right people to disciple the kids in your church. Everyone can pray. Not everyone can or should be in a classroom, but everyone can pray and everyone should pray. And you never know, maybe it's not the right season. The second thing is, what's the goal? Goals guide what decisions we make, how we allocate our time, and how we use our budget. And it helps us know who we need to bring along. When you are lacking goals, you are lacking direction. Goals aren't just for January at the beginning of the year or maybe in the fall when we're kicking off a new school year. Goals are for everyday activities. Goals help you plan your week. Rhythms help you plan your season. With every event, every strategy, every initiative, we ask, what's the goal? Where's the value? Not so leaders stay focused on numbers and dollars. It's so leaders can continue to do what God is calling them to do. Let's take volunteer training, for example. What's the goal? Is the goal building community, making memories together, training on new policies, introducing a new curriculum, better equipping on how to share the gospel, communicating a new vision for the year? There's a lot of options when it comes to goals for volunteer trainings. But let's get specific. If your goal is to help your volunteers build greater community, then I would recommend sharing a meal together. That should go in your budget to create space for your volunteers to sit in a circle instead of rows and share a meal. Maybe you play a fun game that gets everyone laughing. If your goal is to introduce a new curriculum, then I would build in time to practice the new curriculum in the classrooms and give volunteers space to ask questions. Let's do one more. If your goal is to train on policy, then I would invite a few key leaders from each age group to help you teach, set up a trivia quiz, and plan for an epic dessert bar as a celebration for getting through all the content. You can have more than one goal, but when you define the goal, you make better and wiser decisions. Sunday mornings can have goals. Volunteer lunches can have goals. Have you ever thought about how the goals we set for a specific year or a specific event can help us pray bolder and more specific prayers? If you've never set goals before or are not even sure where to start as we jump into 2025, download our goal setting guide. The link is in the show notes and you can get started today. It's never too late. The third thing is train every Sunday. I love this one. This is probably one of my favorite things that I get to talk about as a coach. But training once a year or even twice a year is important. It creates rhythms and it helps you reestablish some goals and some values. But the reality is that no one will remember all of the things you covered in that training to be able to carry them through the rest of the year. You should be training every Sunday by what you say and what you do. It's really not as hard as you think. Pre-service huddles are a great way to get a training point across. And we know that some churches can't do a pre-service huddle for one reason or another. So think about having you or a lead volunteer go door to door in your classrooms on Sunday morning to remind your volunteers about a specific policy. Or send a video text on Saturday night or Sunday morning to get a training point across. Volunteers have what I call vision amnesia. You live in the vision and mission of your church Monday through Sunday. Your team does not. They forget. Once they leave that church on Sunday afternoon, they often forget until the next time they are at church. So you have to remind them. You have to remind them of bathroom policies. You have to teach them how you are defining big theological concepts in a way that makes sense to the kids in your classrooms. You have to equip them with tips on how to make an activity run smoother. Training should happen weekly in small, bite-sized amounts. Don't wait until your next annual training to shower your volunteers with wisdom and advice and tips and tricks. Sprinkle them out throughout the year. Give your volunteers the small, bite-sized things that they can remember. It'll be so much easier. All right, the fourth thing is pick up the phone. This is a good one and one that I say often, hence why it's on the list. Phone calls are better than emails or text messages 10 out of 10 times. I promise. Pick up the phone. It shows people you are more focused on your relationship than your to-do list. It shows people you value them and their time and the ways they give to the kids' ministry. And it often resolves any questions or conflicts much quicker than going back and forth on email. Now, here are my words of advice. It takes practice. Some people are extremely awkward on the phone, and you have to lean into the awkwardness a little and build some phone muscles. It will get better the more you practice. When in doubt, You can always say politely that you have to jump into a meeting or you have another call to make, and you'll say to your volunteers that you will talk to them later. My second word of advice is that this may be a me thing, but for me as a woman in ministry, I would only call other women. When I would text, I would often text a husband and wife team if they serve together. And I always felt comfortable emailing the men on my team directly. If you have a male on your staff team or even on your lead volunteer team, invite them to make phone calls for you and to check in with volunteers and ask for prayer requests. You don't have to do it like me. And I know for some of you, you may be hearing that and it may be freeing for you to put some different rhythms in place so that all your volunteers are cared for. So as we begin this new year, try it. Just on your commute in the car, when you're sitting in your office, when you're cutting out paper, just call one of your volunteers. Call one of your parents and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm checking in. We're excited to jump into this next season of ministry together and just see what happens. It will deepen your relationships. It will help your volunteers feel valued and seen. And I think it will be fun. So the last one, but certainly not least, I would say you can do it. Probably at the end of every phone call or every Zoom call I had, I would offer up some encouragement and remind the leaders that you can do it. Many times, kids ministry leaders would leave our phone calls or our Zoom calls with a very large to-do list of here's all the things that I need to do before our next call. And it might be overwhelming. And it might be hard or challenging, or you have to kind of get some answers from your senior leadership or really put some things in practice. So I would remind them, you can do it. You can. God has called you in this position, in this season, and it may be really hard. And you may be totally exhausted. But the reality is, you can do it, even if it's hard. Even if you need to start small, even if you need to split it up into 10 different tasks, you can do it. You can change your mind. You can do something differently. Whatever you're working on, whatever you have planned, whatever your goals are for 2025, you can do it. And just remember, the power of the Holy Spirit is working in you and through you and in your team and through your team. And there's so much joy to be found in that. And so don't get discouraged. You can do it. What God is asking you to do, what He is calling you to do, you can do it. So those are the 5 things that I said the most in 2024 as a kids ministry coach. As we look forward to 2025, I'm excited to coach more kids ministry leaders as they continue to learn and grow and start new positions and begin new initiatives and all the fun things that come with a new year. If you want to learn more about coaching, I would love to talk to you. I would love to jump on the phone and chat about the different coaching opportunities. If coaching is not the best next step for you, join the cohort. Our cohort starts in about a month and a half, and that is our 9-week group coaching sessions, and it's a blast. It's definitely one of my favorite things that I get to do, and this spring session is turning out to be very exciting. So friends, as we begin a new year, just remember, don't say no for them. Figure out what the goal is. You can train your team every Sunday. Pick up the phone and you can do it. I hope this episode was encouraging. As always, we love when you rate and review the Kids Ministry Circle podcast. It just helps other kids ministry leaders just like you find our episodes. We've got a fun year planned on the podcast. And so don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast so they get dropped right into your podcast player every Wednesday morning. Don't forget to follow us on social media over on Instagram and Facebook at Kids Ministry Circle. Next week, it's going to be me again. We're going to talk about what's coming up for 2025, some new things that we're launching, and just new opportunities for you to learn and grow as a leader in the kids ministry space and in the next gen space. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.